Okay. You can go ahead, Danny, or Cam. I can have them cut out the beginning too when we upload it to YouTube.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You can go ahead and get started. I can have them cut around this beginning part when we upload it.
Oh, this screen. Oh, yeah. Could you switch to the next screen, possibly? That was kind of throwing me because it was okay. All right, and action. Hello there. My name's Cameron Drury. I'm with the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. Joined by some colleagues from DMHA and some colleagues from IHCDA who are helping us administer this program. We're going to do a presentation on the process from an applicant side, and following that, we're going to do the process for an interested landlords. So next slide, please. Just to reintroduce myself, Cam Drury, program director for this particular project, and peer coach specialist is my title. Emily Truelove, our bureau chief of addiction services. Kelly Welker is our assistant deputy director of addiction. And then from IHCDA, Jeff Z is director of housing choice programs, and Liz Shun is EHV and landlord engagement analyst. Next slide, please. So the Landlord Mitigation Reserve originally started due to a number of stories from people in recovery who had really made huge strides and were in really solid recovery, and yet found themselves still unable to rent or lease an apartment or house. Specifically, I know there were some nurses that in the middle of their substance use disorder had some issues that caused them to lose their nursing license, and they did all the required steps and legwork and work to get it reinstated and still couldn't rent, or lease an apartment or house. The Scarlet F is for felony, and it generally follows someone for their life. In addition to whatever sentence they may have originally received, there are a number of other barriers that they face that people without a felony do not. And many, if not most cases, people with a felony conviction are automatically rejected from potential landlords as soon as they do a background check. We know that this information is readily available, from my case and everywhere. You can't keep it a secret, basically. And that Scarlet F then, as I said, prevents you from being able to lease a unit to live in. So we partnered with the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, or IHCDA, to address this issue. This is not a funding program. Let me start with that. This is not that, unfortunately. I know there's massive need, so I wish it was a funding program, but that's not what this is. And ultimately, our goal is to incentivize landlords to lease available units that they have to individuals in recovery who happen to have a felony on their record that in some way relates to their past SUD, substance use disorder. Next slide, please. So we know that housing is one of our basic physiological needs, along with things like air, water, and food. We know from Maslow's hierarchy of needs that when a lower need is met, the next need on the hierarchy becomes our focus of attention. We're still on that bottom physiological stage as far as housing. And Maslow considered the physiological needs to be the most essential because, again, these are basic things that every human needs. If someone is lacking in more than one need, they're likely to try to meet the physiological need first. So before we can really find recovery, really we need housing. You have to have a place to rest your head in a safe environment. Next slide, please. So I think many people know that there's substantial evidence that indicates that approximately 50% of adults who once met diagnostic criteria for a substance use disorder, or about 25 million, are currently in stable remission. We know also that substance use disorders can be effectively treated with reoccurring rates no higher than those for other chronic illnesses such as diabetes, asthma, and hypertension. And what that tells us basically is that people do change. They do it all the time, every day. That old saying, if people don't change, is just simply not true. People change in substantial ways, and there have been countless millions of people who have found recovery and stayed in recovery. Next slide, please. So for the actual participants, say you're someone that has a felony on your record, in some way related to your past substance use disorder, and you can't find an apartment that will rent to you. This is where we can step in. You apply, you fill out an application for us and provide us all the necessary documentation. What the criteria include is no pending charges or open cases for at least 1 year, and at least 1 year of consistent employment with up to 1 month of a gap allowable. Obviously, this requirement is waived for individuals unable to work due to a disability. We need documentation for pretty much everything. So if the disability is not readily apparent, we will need some documentation, which could include a SSDI or SSI award letter or documentation, or also some letter from a knowledgeable professional stating that the individual is unable to work due to a disability. Next slide, please. This requirement obviously will also be waived for individuals 60 years or older. Again, getting back to the criteria, must maintain good standing with any criminal justice entity, and that includes probation, parole, work release, and problem-solving courts. And as I said before, documentation of everything. Next slide, please. So the process works that you submit your application to us at DMHA. We have a team actually together that we review and approve or deny an applicant. Basically, that approval process just includes what the slide showed earlier for the basic requirements. An accepted LMR participant will be notified by a member of our DMHA team. They will receive a signed certificate of approval with our Director Jay Chaudhry's signature on it, and also a list of landlords who are approved in their area. For the time being, we're mostly trying to provide people with these list of landlords once they're approved. Just for a variety of reasons, including some landlord stigma. That's basically why we're doing that. But ultimately, once you're approved, you'll reach out and present your signed certificate to participating landlords to get started. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is our website for this program. It'll basically give you a lot of what I just said. But also this is where you can download your application, and it'll give you some idea of what will work as documentation for each requirement. So if you're in need of this program, I highly encourage you to apply as soon as you can. And thank you very much. Turn it over to Liz or Jeff.
Thanks, Cam. So thanks for covering kind of the program from the participant side. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on the landlord side and what the benefits for participation is for a landlord. As Cam mentioned, this is not a rental assistance funding program, so it's not providing ongoing rental assistance to participants. What we are providing is essentially insurance to the landlord that if they do accept a participant in this program and something goes wrong, they skip it on the unit before the lease, or they damage the unit, we will provide funding to cover those damages, and I'll get into the details on how that process works in a little bit. But really, the program came about because DMHA approached IHCA and said, we're seeing this need for this population. They're having this barrier to get into housing, even though they're stably in recovery. And a lot of times they've been working for a while, they have income. They just can't find a landlord that won't screen them out due to their past felonies related to their addiction. So this was the program that we kind of pitched to DMHA, and they agreed that it would be a good idea, a good pilot program to see how it works. Go ahead and next slide, thanks. All right, so our IHCA also has a program page on our website. If you Google IHCA Landlord Mitigation Reserve Program, it'll be the first link there. And this page includes kind of all the forms and manuals for the program to really get into the weeds of how the program's operated, including the program lease addendum. So when a participant signs a lease under the program, there is a lease addendum that IHCA requires the landlord and tenant to complete. The purpose of that lease addendum is to outline the requirements of the program. Those main requirements are that the tenant will follow the terms of their lease. Also that if there's any items in the lease that are not allowable under state or local law, those items are automatically voided. And then also cover the maximum reimbursement amounts in the program and what the claims process is for making those reimbursements. Additionally, there's also a landlord registration of interest form. I would encourage any landlord who is interested in being connected to participants for this program to fill out that form. And there is a fax number or an email on that form that you can send it to IHCA. It just asks for some basic information about where your units are located, not necessarily exact addresses, but what county or city they are in, as well as what kind of bedroom mix you have, so that we're not sending you a family of 4 for a 1-bedroom apartment. Next slide, Liz. Okay. So as I mentioned, one of those forms is the lease addendum. To go into a little more detail about what is covered in that, it must be signed by both parties, obviously, that meaning the tenant and the landlord. IHCA does not sign that document. Additionally, it covers the description of eligible reimbursements, which we can get into a little bit more later, but generally it's lost rent due to the lease being terminated early by the tenant or damage to the unit. Additionally, it establishes a cap of $2,500 on total reimbursement. Go ahead, next slide, Liz. Okay. So if a tenant skips out on a lease early, the program will cover up to 2 months of rent, not to exceed the HUD published fair market rent for that county. This is meant just to cover the time that the unit is now vacant while you're looking for a new tenant. We're not going to pay for the entire term of the remaining lease or any lease break fees that are above that 2 months of fair market rent limit. And that's just to ensure that the funds for the program last and we can serve as many participants in the program as possible. Additionally, we will cover, as I just mentioned, fees associated with the tenant breaking the lease, not to exceed 2 months rent. And then also damages beyond normal wear and tear after the tenant has moved out, not to exceed lesser of documented costs of repairs or $2,500. So documented costs would include invoices from contractors or receipts if you had to buy materials at the store, etc. But we do require that you submit that documentation before we will reimburse for damages. Things that we will not cover in reimbursement. So cost of repairs exceeding or existing prior to the tenant signing the lease, cost of repairs, kind of normal turnover cost of a unit, things associated with normal wear and tear, cleaning carpets, painting, etc. Costs incurred for an eviction, so we're not going to cover any attorney fees or anything like that if you're evicting the tenant. And then also lost rent post eviction. So if the tenant is evicted, we'll pay for any rent that they missed prior to that eviction, any remaining balances, but we're not going to cover lost rent for future months that they're not in the unit. Next slide, Liz. All right, so the roles and responsibilities between DMHA and IHCDA, as Cam covered, DMHA is responsible for determining eligibility for individuals, participants on the program. They are taking applications from participants that believe that they may be eligible for the program and meet the program requirements, and then collecting documentation and confirming that responsibility, they're confirming that eligibility. Once they have determined that someone is eligible, they are providing IHCDA with that participant's name, and we are working, IHCDA then will work with the participant to identify landlords in the area that they want to live who have expressed an interest in working with this program and housing this population of substance use disorder individuals in recovery. And then additionally, IHCDA, we hold the funds for the program, process claims that landlords may have, make those payments to landlords, and those kind of basic program functions once the participant is housed. Next slide. All right. So as I mentioned, once DMHA provides us with an eligible participant, we'll assist with finding them housing. That still is largely on the participant's responsibility to be doing that outreach to landlords and filling out applications, et cetera, but we will provide them with a list of interested landlords. And then obviously the eligible participant is responsible for following all the terms of the rule of the lease that they sign, and also entering that program lease addendum. The landlord's roles and responsibilities, agreeing to reduce their screening criteria for the program. So if they would typically screen out for a past felony, that they'll waive that. That's kind of the whole point of the program, to address that barrier. And then entering into their standard lease agreement in addition to the program lease addendum, and then complying with Indiana local requirements for landlord responsibilities, and then complying with fair housing rules, and if applicable, submitting necessary claims to IHCDA, including the documentation for those claims. Next slide, Liz. So as I mentioned earlier, if you are interested in participating, please reach out to us. There is the registration of interest form on our website. Again, if you Google IHCDA Landlord Mitigation Reserve Program, our website will be the first link there, and the registration of interest form is on there. Or if you just want to email us at landlordmitigation@ihcda.in.gov, just include the primary contact for the properties that you're interested in having participate in the program, the property management company's name or owner's name, phone number, bedroom sizes that you have, where those units are located. But the main thing is just reach out to us. If you don't include everything, Liz will work with you and follow up to get any more information that we need. So just if you're interested, send us an email at Landlord Mitigation, and we'll work with you to get all the information that we need to add you to our list of landlords who are interested in participating in the program. Next slide, Liz. All right, so thanks for joining. I think at this time we can take some questions. There is some links here for helpful information, including our website link, and then also contact information if you need to reach out with any other questions. But right now, I think we'll pause and take questions from any landlords or participants, or interested participants.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. Thank you for the presentation. Are there any reporting requirements or monitoring needed from the landlords or the participants in the program in order to stay eligible for the reimbursements, if a reimbursement is warranted?
Yeah, no, the only requirements is that lease addendum be executed and signed. And then if there are any claims that need to be filed, along with documentation for that claims, if it's damages such as contractor invoices or materials cost, also sending that executed lease addendum so that we know that was executed. You don't have to submit that at the time that it's executed, just at the time that you would have any reimbursements that you are filing a claim for.
Great. And what is the time frame for filing for a reimbursement? Is there a deadline in which to do so?
We do not have an established deadline. I would say just reasonable. So typically within 30 days of either the tenant leaving the unit or those costs being incurred that you're asking for reimbursement for. And then IHCDA will process those claims and get payment out the door within 10 business days or 2 weeks.
And then my last question is, do you have any blanket exceptions or requirement or not carve outs for folks who have a violent crime on their record or a or a registered sex offender? Is there anything that this includes that person from this program, or how does that work?
Cam, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah. So really, basically, our primary consideration is that it relates, whatever the charge is it relates to substance use disorder. So basically, that's the answer. If it's related to a substance use disorder that you had, you could still be eligible, even with regardless of your charge.
Yeah, I'll add that we are really asking landlords to waive their screening criteria for those felonies that are related to the substance use disorder. If the participant has other felonies on their record that may not be related to substance use disorder, it would still be within the landlord's right to screen out for those reasons, as they normally would.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. So, say we don't have any units available currently, can we still get signed up for this?
Yeah, I'll let Liz answer that one, actually.
Excuse me. Yes. So we're looking for landlords who are interested in the program, and their total number of units and um, the bedroom size and everything. So you don't have to wait until you have one available. Just letting us know that you're interested, and then we can have clients reach out.
Awesome. And then what about any current tenants who might qualify for this program as well? Can we refer them to it?
It's really meant to work with potential participants whose main barrier to housing is that existing felony and they're having trouble getting into housing. So if a participant is already in housing, that's not really the target population of the program. So most likely they would not be eligible.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I have a question. If a landlord already has a tenant that potentially would meet the requirements for this, could they refer them to the program?
They may be able to. We're not going to cover any costs that were incurred under their current lease term. But if they're at lease renewal or they're moving for some reason and they're once again facing those barriers related to their substance use disorder history or felony history, they may be eligible, but they would not be eligible under their current lease. And they do need to be kind of facing those barriers and finding housing. So most likely in that instance, they're eligible if they're moving for some reason, or if for some reason the landlord wouldn't renew their lease.
Thank you, Emily.
So what if a landlord's interested in participating, but they don't have any availability? What should they do?
Yeah, they can still send us all their information. And when we have a participant who's interested in units in their area, we'll have them reach out because they may have availability at that time.
If I do need to file a claim, how long does it typically take to receive the payment?
Yeah, We will send IHDA will send the payment out within 10 days of receiving all the proper documentation for that claim. And then it may take a few additional days, just depending on postal service or the bank if it's an ACH payment.
I have a question. How is this being advertised, put out to the communities? How is this landlord and mitigation reserve thing? How is that being advertised out in the community?
Yeah, I'll cover the landlord side of that question and then let Cam answer how we're recruiting participants. On the landlord side, IHDA has an extensive contact list of landlords who have participated in other programs of ours, such as the emergency rental assistance related to COVID or our Section 8 programs, et cetera. So we are using that list of contact to reach out to landlords through email, hosting events like this where we're providing presentations on the program. And we